All right, what's going on, folks? We're going to be looking at a Linux video that I'm going to be doing a reaction to. And now it's been a bit. I've been doing some other related content, but not quite that content. So Linux is becoming more mainstream. Really? So this is Brody and EG. I got nothing against them generically. I just find their content just not for me. It's kind of like, most of my content's not for most people, so that's okay. So find the stuff that works for you. But I wanted to kind of react to this because I did find it interesting that it popped up on my screen. And these guys usually tend to float more in the kind of the technical end of Linux and less consumery ways of looking at it. Generically, not always. Like they have consumer oriented content, but their approach to that content is usually from the more technical aspect of things. For me, I'm a desktop user. I give two flying fucks about the server and the back end and all the other stuff that you can do. Yeah, great, cool. I can, if I want to run all that shit, awesome. I don't. So for me, Linux is just the best solution overall. Hence why it's used. If it wasn't, I would go and try to find the one that is close to the best solution available. So let's get into this and see what they have to say.
It's weird. I will make videos on licensing that I feel like are pretty interesting videos, and judging by, people having their discussions in the comment sections, like in videos that aren't related to that one, it seems like licensing is this topic that a lot of people in the FOSS space are really interested in. And maybe that was the case like a couple of years ago, but I think we're actually sort of getting into this space where Linux is kind of branching out of just the FOSS people.
Oh. Linux and open source in general, because I'm not going to go the free Libre. I'm not in that crowd. The open source mainstream acceptance of, Linux and that kind of stuff has been happening over the years for a long time. You can trace it probably back to when TiVo started using it and other things. Companies like Arcos and their portable media players were all Linux based. So to say it's mainstream is relative. We've used Linux and consumers use Linux almost every damn day they use the internet. They just don't know it. Linux has been less in your face about marketing and that kind of stuff. That you would be correct. It's always been there, especially in the last, 30 plus years. It's been there. It's just, it hasn't been there in a kind of desktop in your face major promotion kind of way. I mean, unless you count the IBM ads from like 2000 when they were like, "Hey, Linux, yay!" and then they do nothing after those ads. So mainstream is relative. If you're talking where every other consumer can use it on a desktop type machine, yeah, this is the first time that that's happened. Despite OEMs and stuff attempting half-heartedly to ship stuff, Valve is actually the only one who like, here's a Linux console. You can do whatever the fuck you want with the hardware.
Especially now that we have, the Steam Deck is obviously.
Yeah.
Are you still there? Discord just froze for a moment. Like you've got the Steam Deck now, where now you've got a lot more of the Linux gamers, and you had Proton for a thing like quite a while now. So using Linux isn't just a thing that only the FOSS people are doing now, and I guess the proportion of people that are using Linux that actually care about the license and about how things are licensed, I don't think the raw number is going down, but the overall it looks like a lot less because of that growth that Linux has been having.
It's just not conversation dominator like it used to be. Oh, this is LGPL, this is GPL, oh, that's a BSD license, blah, 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 blah. Ironically, I will say I fall into the camp that the BSD license is actually more free than anything that is GPL, because BSD, do what the hell you want with it. Or personally, my favorite is just public domain or the WTF license. But as far as, it's just not a conversation dominator anymore. Like, when the principles of the software and the development of that software is passed on to the hardware with things like in the Steam Deck, where Valve doesn't care two shits what you do with the hardware. You can nuke and pave it, you can keep it, you can do whatever. Yes, it ties into a proprietary store, but they have open sourced, the schematics for the shell. They have repairability. They have, like, everything we would complain and bitch about and moan about in any type of comments from a consumer, I'm gonna buy this level, Valve doesn't do. So there's nothing to complain about because all of that is being fixed. So the technical arguments of, oh, GTK versus Qt, or it's system bloated, or use X, boot up manager and all the other crap that we argue about, literally at the end of the day, people just want their shit to work, so they don't really care. So while we might argue the merits of licensing and what that means for the community and all the other stuff, generically, people are going to be far more selfish oriented and singular focused on what they want to work. And in this case, it's the Steam Deck and Proton and that shit. So they have one and the thing that's changed is that we have one focal point, more or less, to say, hey, Valve, fix this shit, please. That's the key that Linux has been missing for a long time. We had it with Ubuntu for a while, and then we didn't. And now Valve has been the standard bearer of, like, fixing stuff with the community and the input and their which is weird, Valve and transparency. But they have found that working with the community instead of against it helps improve it drastically and their development drastically. So most people aren't going to argue about the licensing so much, as long as organizations are transparent and willing to actually work with people. I used to hate hearing all these stupid arguments about, like contributor license agreements and all this other stuff. And it's like, whatever. If somebody decides to sign up for it, cool. That's their prerogative. It's not your place to tell them to not sign up for it. You might not like it. You can say, I don't like this, and just move on. Licensing is probably some of the stupidest arguments we have. Like, the vitriol around licensing is some of the stupidest arguments we have in the Linux community as a whole. Like, use whatever dumbass license you want. You want GPL, cool. You want MPL, the Mozilla Public License. You want LGPL, BSD, WTF, cares. Just use whatever license you want. And really, at the end of the day, that's all that matters. So for me, is it becoming more mainstream now? It's always been there. Again, it's more in the consumer space and in the consumer space than it used to be, where it was all back end stuff.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually a really cool observation. I see on Reddit all these people, like presumably kids that are getting into the Steam Deck, they're getting into Linux, and they're like, whoa, you just pass in these parameters and all the performance changes and stuff. Like, what's funny is back in XP and Vista and 7, you could do that too. Like, that's how Windows, like, you pass in all these crazy parameters and get games and stuff to behave different. And now with Windows 10 and 11, it's just like, this is how it runs, and there's really not much you can do to fine tune it or whatever. And then you go over to Linux, and there is definitely a type of techie tinkery person that likes that. Like, for a long time, I personally denied the fact that I like it when my system breaks. Like, isn't that crazy? Like, but you know what I'm talking about,
no,
right?
I know exactly what you
mean. Something screws up, and I'm like, all right, I'm rolling up my sleeves, and we're gonna get to the bottom of it. And what's cool about it is a lot of times after fighting with that challenge, I'm smarter and I'm better equipped to deal with issues like that. Like for me personally, I like that.
Mhm.
And
Yes, but that's not going to be everybody. Cool that it's you. And yeah, there's a degree of a lot of people that the tinkering and all the other stuff is awesome. There are going to be people who very much treat the Steam Deck is the example of, at least in your conversation, the Steam Deck's the example. Most people, everybody from LTT to MKBHD to everybody I have watched do a review on it has reviewed it like a game console. So they don't care about all the tinkering. And those are techie people. They're like, cool, I can sit in bed and play, 2K insert year here for insert sport here. They don't care. For us, where we're like, oh, cool, I can get extra battery life by, dropping the graphics down. I can, shut off Bluetooth. I can put the frame limiter on. That's only GUI surface level stuff. We're not talking about, oh, okay, so I want to open up the read-write accessibility and, install packages from like the AUR, or, insert package manager here if you nuked and paved your OS. I'm not going to say not most people are going to do that. It's cool they have the ability to, especially now with every other company, be like slapping your hands and trying to handcuff the fucking hardware down to the level of like, no, ours. And people finally is being like, hey, we actually like being able to fix our shit. So it's a balance. The general consumer doesn't care. Like the general everyday mom and pop, if it breaks, their mentality is go and buy a new one generically. There's a lot of people who, hey, that's just the way they are. Or in some people's case, they will pay somebody to, hey, fix me or fix this. That's just what they do. They don't want to deal with it. There's not that segment of the population is not as big as tinkerers and techies seem to think. It's actually much, much, much smaller. As an example of what I mean, why is it a company like Canonical couldn't maintain a desktop, yet you have a 12 or 13-year-old dev running Ubuntu Unity, and he had just ported the shit over to Arch. It says a lot. There's a lot of different types of tinkerers in the world. There is a lot, but it's not the majority. It's a very, very small minority of the 8 billion plus people that live on the planet.
And I can see how not everybody is like that, but I like it.
No, I use Arch, so like, yeah.
So that's your jam.
Exactly. Well, I've sort of turned my system breaking into a job, so like there is that as well. But even just when I was like first starting to use Linux, I did enjoy it when something, as long as I didn't have like an assignment due or something at the time. But when I wasn't super busy with other things, if something went wrong, like that's an opportunity to learn something new about your system. Like, hey, I didn't understand the way that GPG keys worked, for example, and my keys had expired in my package manager. So now I have to go update that list, and because I'm gonna update it, I might as well like look into why that's a thing that needs to be updated. Why this is a thing that we have connected to our packages, or a recent issue with Grub where there was like this broken version of Grub Shift, and
yeah, you got burned by that too.
I skipped the affected version, so I didn't have any like bootloader issues with it, but yeah, it like that's an opportunity to like look into why this is the case. Maybe not look into it as much as I might do for a video where I'm gonna read some mailing lists for 3 hours, but it's still an opportunity to look into sort of why this happened and why the bootloader functions in this fashion. Maybe even look at what other bootloaders might be available. Like, hey, is this a chance to try out System Deboot or Refined, or maybe even go like, just straight UEFI boot and just skip the bootloader altogether.
Yeah, totally.
I'm not gonna I will agree that the nice thing about Linux and open source and all the other stuff is your knowledge base of it can grow as much as you want it to. The problem is you're assuming that the mainstream wants to grow their knowledge base. Most do not. In some way, shape, or form. Time versus money. People want to be entertained. People want to waste their time and do their time in different ways. And they will assign a monetary value or a time investment value to it. And most people won't be like us, where honestly for me now, if I run Garuda, if Arch breaks or my system is borked, I just go to a different distro. I am done in the days of running around trying to fix every stupid thing that sometimes breaks in a system. This is the same. I took the same approach with Mac OS and Windows. Oh, it's broken. It's a headache. I'm not going to spend the X amount of time dealing with it. All my crap's backed up, so it doesn't matter. Programs can be reinstalled, all the other crap, all the important stuff that I need is on backup. So whatever. The OS is just the canvas. I'm starting fresh with a new canvas. That at most is what most consumers will do.
I've graduated from QA and software. I guess it is software engineering. I'm like a systems engineer, basically. Like some people would call it DevOps. I don't like the term DevOps very much. I'm just a operations dude. But when something breaks and screws up like that, my thought is like, okay, this will never happen again. I am going to find a way to script this so this never breaks or screws up again. So that's I wouldn't have that drive had I not used Linux and had my system break. And it's don't get me wrong, like it's painful, Like I remember one time I wanted to show a friend something. I was running OpenSUSE a long time ago, and I did an update, and the display drivers were gone, like nothing worked, and like that's really frustrating, and it was embarrassing. But like, damn it, it was character building, and I'm a better person because that happened. That's what I tell myself anyway.
Well, you gotta convince yourself somehow the Linux problems are like good for you. We can't just sit around just complaining everything's bad all the time. We gotta like convince other people outside of Linux that it's not all bad. The grass is actually greener on the other side. Come over here, come experiment with it, see what it's like.
So I think they tend to live, they talk about getting out of the bubble. I think the problem is they live in the bubble and they don't jump around to the other things. I'm not saying they don't use them, etc., but I think the thought process is too techy. It mainstream is relative. Mainstream tech, where idiotic blogger sites, essentially, like The Verge and Ars Technica and all those jackwagons are writing about it. I would agree that it's gone mainstream there. Among the general populace, besides from the Steam Deck, I'm not seeing a shit ton of computers flying off the store shelves that run Linux. I'm not saying they aren't. You have the boutique manufacturers like System 76, etc., who are also, doing sales and making stuff. But the point is, you're not running into Best Buy to buy a Linux system powered by Pop! OS. At best, what you're going to find is a neutered Gentoo running Chrome OS. That is the reality. So, mainstream is relative to how you view it. Being put in front of consumers, yeah, you have a neutered Gentoo essentially, and then you have a not lockdown, but you have a piece of software that the experience is tied to that piece of hardware. So that is really relative to what you're looking at. So I think the Steam Deck is the best example of Linux in consumer hands on a day-to-day basis. That is not something from a overglorified browser-based OS, which is Chrome OS, if those are wondering.